The US does not like when any nation starts to grow. The US wants to remain the only country that is at benefit, and every other nation should always remain struggling. Now, while nations are becoming unstoppable, the US does not shy away from putting sanctions on these nations to stop them. After Russia and China were exposed to US sanctions, the US pointed the sanctions toward a new region, the Middle East. The United States recently imposed restrictions on the export of advanced computer chips to some Middle Eastern countries. This was announced by NVIDIA, a leading US technology firm. Many experts are saying that these restrictions have a lot to do with the US-China rivalry. The Middle East facing these sanctions is another after effect of US-China tensions. But how exactly? This has sparked concerns in the Middle East as to why the ongoing technological rivalry between China and the US has extended its reach to the Middle East. Now the question is, what will be the potential consequences of this? What desire does the US hold? Advanced computer chips, often referred to as semiconductors, are the lifeblood of modern technology. They power everything from supercomputers to smartphones and are indispensable for the development of artificial intelligence (AI). In the race to dominate the AI landscape, the US and China are fighting for supremacy, but each with a different approach. While China works towards self-sufficiency, the US works on putting sanctions to limit countries. There are some chips that the US produces, used worldwide, that are exposed to US sanctions. Companies like NVIDIA make these chips. NVIDIA is known for making chips for AI in recent times, but as soon as the US figured out the world needed these chips, it restricted exports. In its effort to maintain a technological edge in the AI field, the US Department of Commerce announced export restrictions on advanced chips to China and Russia. These restrictions aim to hinder Chinese access to critical components required for advanced AI development. The August announcement extends these export restrictions further, raising questions about the specific Middle Eastern countries affected. So why are the Middle Eastern nations now being affected by the sanctions? Why is the US targeting these nations? While the US government and NVIDIA have not disclosed the names of the countries targeted by these export restrictions, several nations in the Middle East are prime candidates. John Calabresi, a professor specializing in US foreign policy, suggests that Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates (UAE) could be under scrutiny due to various factors. But why did the US put sanctions on them? The experts say there are two reasons. One that the US suggests, and the other one which is the reality. So let's first talk about what the US has to say. For Iran, they say, it has demonstrated a high level of proficiency in cyber activities, making it a potential concern for US national security. Saudi Arabia and the UAE possess significant financial resources, making them potential players in AI development. Qatar and Israel have vested interests in AI and could be considered for export restrictions. But that's what the US is telling us, and we all know this is not the entire truth. So let's talk about the reality. It's becoming increasingly evident that Middle Eastern nations are strengthening their ties with China. One significant indicator of this trend is Saudi Arabia's support for initiatives such as de-dollarization. This move suggests that Middle Eastern countries are exploring alternatives to the US dollar as the primary currency for international trade. This shift could potentially have far-reaching implications for global financial markets. Moreover, Middle Eastern nations have aspirations of becoming the new Europe and playing a significant role in shaping the New World Order. These ambitions have raised concerns in the United States. To the US, China's growing influence in the region translates to more potential adversaries. As Middle Eastern nations cozy up to China, it might seem as though they are distancing themselves from the US. Middle Eastern countries' engagement with China is not just about taking sides in a geopolitical rivalry. Instead, it reflects their desire to diversify their partnerships and reduce their dependence on any single global power. This strategy allows them to pursue their interests more effectively, negotiate better deals, and gain access to resources, technology, and markets. For instance, China's Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) offers Middle Eastern nations the chance to enhance their infrastructure, stimulate economic growth, and boost trade. These opportunities are appealing to countries seeking to develop and modernize their economies. Furthermore, while the United States may view China's friends as its bitter enemies, this binary perspective oversimplifies the complex web of international relations. Middle Eastern countries are pragmatically building relationships with multiple global powers, including the US, China, and others, to secure their interests and foster economic development. The US government justifies these export restrictions by emphasizing that AI-enabling chips are force multipliers for military modernization and human rights abuses. They also present the absurd idea that Chinese firms might exploit Middle Eastern countries as intermediaries to bypass restrictions and access advanced chips. If that's the case, the US will stop doing business with the entire world because China can use any nation to get US tech. The presence of Chinese tech giants like Huawei in Middle Eastern markets has intensified these concerns. The entire matter revolves around China and Middle East relations. It is something making the US concerned that it has started to put sanctions on the Middle East as well. But what role does the Middle East have in AI? Countries in the Middle East that are heavily investing in AI have deepened their ties with China over the past decade. Saudi Arabia, for instance, has witnessed strengthening tech and scientific cooperation with China, including substantial Chinese student and researcher presence at institutions like the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, KAUST. This deepening connection increases the potential for technological collaboration, including access to advanced chips. The UAE is in a similar position, having established a Ministry of Artificial Intelligence in 2017 and developed its advanced AI model called Falcon. While both countries maintain close ties with the US, their growing relationships with China cannot be ignored. Israel, another major player in the AI and chip manufacturing industry, has also cultivated strong ties with China. Chinese tech giants like Huawei and Xiaomi have research centers in Israel, and Chinese investors support local chip makers. Israel's strategic position in the tech world has allowed some US tech companies to navigate export restrictions through their Israeli subsidiaries. However, experts believe that the newly imposed export restrictions on chips may have already impacted NVIDIA in Israel. These restrictions apply to products made partially or wholly with US technology, regardless of their place of manufacture. While the US government shows concerns about democratic AI and its potential misuse in authoritarian states, experts believe that the export restrictions are not primarily motivated by political pressure on Middle Eastern countries. Instead, these controls are seen as a message to Gulf partners about the seriousness of the US in its tech competition with China. But the only thing it is doing is increasing the scope of the war. First, only China and Russia were involved, and now the Middle East is also involved. This will only make things worse for the US. China's relations with all nations are increasing. The only country that is going to face trouble will be the US. It's because in the end, it will have to end relations with all nations. After all nations are China's friends. Due to fear of China becoming the tech leader, the US is making discussions that will not end well for it.